morning, friends. Happy Vlogmas. Today is Sunday, so you're getting me in my pajamas because I don't have anywhere to go. I've had a very busy and full week behind me. I should have put my wheel up here first. I've had a very busy and full week behind me, so I'm taking today to kind of rest and relax, recover. So you're getting full-on bathrobe, super comfy, cozy Tashi, and I hope that's okay. I hope your December is off to a great start. Today is, I never know what day it is. I probably should look this up in advance. Today is December 11th. So we are just about approaching the middle of the month. And I hope it's been good for you. I hope it's been soothing. I hope you're finding rest. I hope that whatever you needed for this season, it is finding its way into your general circle and general sphere. I'm having a really good month. I've been really enjoying these Vlogmas videos and just sitting and chatting with you about what about various making related things and about spinning. I just finished a big spin this morning that I will share the next time I film a podcast episode, which will probably be over the weekend because we're doing bi-weekly podcast episodes. Also, I've just been really enjoying filming, so I think once Vlogmas is over, I'll just do some middle other thing videos that are not necessarily full-on podcast episodes because that would be a lot, but project videos or something. Let me know if you're not sick of me and if you want more of me. That seems like I'm asking for compliments. I promise you I'm not. I take all of that back. No. So today, well, first I'll show you how day 5 finished because we're on day 6 today. So for day 5, we were spinning Targi. Here's what it looks like. Really happy with the colors of this. Also tiny Lendrum bobbins all day, every day. So fun. So I'm going to pop this bobbin back on my Lendrum. I've had a few people ask me about fractal spinning. Never fear. The spinning vocabulary lesson is coming. And you get to watch me attempt to make sense of very technical spinning terms with the chaos gremlin in the back of my head just chattering nonstop. I am okay at explaining things. I'm not great. I'm not, Evie at Jillian Eve, and I'm not Rachel at Wool and Spinning, but I know my way around a spinning wheel or two. And I'm hoping that when we get to the spinning vocab, I'll be able to explain things in a way that makes sense. So it's not too late. If there are some vocabulary words or terms or general things that you want explained, leave them in the comments. I'm adding my list. Everyone wants me to talk about fractal spinning. Everyone wants me to talk about grist. And there are a few things that keep popping up. So we have probably 2 or 3 more Vlogmas days before we get to that. So if there's something you really want me to talk about, let me know. I'm going to grab my little parcel for the day, which I probably should have had, but I don't. I think I'm looking for number 19? 18. Oh, there's a little mushroom. How sweet is my little mushroom friend? I have a friend who's obsessed with mushrooms. I might actually just pass this on to her. She might really enjoy it. It's someone in my D&D campaign. Oh my god, you know what would be wild? I haven't decided yet because I'm still short one Vlogmas topic, and honestly, I might just talk to you guys about D&D for half an hour. And if you guys aren't interested, you can skip that week, or you could just watch me spin and put music on if you don't care about D&D. But I kind of want to just talk to you guys about D&D for half an hour. I can talk to you about all my characters because I'm in multiple campaigns. Don't threaten me with a good time, you guys. I might do it. I'm not trying to box myself yet. Yes, this is a spinning and fiber channel, but also I am obsessed with Dungeons and Dragons. So maybe for a chill day, we'll talk about my games and the characters I play. Who knows? Cue the present dance. I've already started opening it because I was thinking about D&D. I played D&D yesterday, so I play D&D multiple times a week. So I'm almost always thinking about spinning, thinking about D&D, or playing D&D. That's my life. Cue the present dance. All right, let's see what Jen has cooked up for us today. Ooh! You guys, this might be it though. We might have met my nemesis. We did not! This is not my nemesis. For a second, I was like, ooh, this feels like a fine wool. We have organic Polworth today, which I happen to like spinning. So here is our fiber braid. And there's a lot more yellow in this one. More yellow. Oh, there's some red. So there's yellow, there's red, there's still the blue, teal, the pink. I mean, I'm super excited to see what this looks like as a finished yarn because this is going to be really pretty. But here is what you're getting, all the red. Let's see. Here we go. Here's what today's fiber braid looks like. Super pretty. Also, I did turn up my lights today because I rewatched 2 days ago's video and I realized it was a little bit dark. And also, if I'm going to be showing you yarn, I probably should have the lights on so you can see what I'm doing. Also, my little moon back there is blue. How about you vote on what color you want it to be next time? Because I have a whole lot of options. It's just a little moonlight because this is Stitches and Starlight. So we have Starlight, we have Moonlight. It's a vibe, you guys. It's a brand. It's not a brand. It's a vibe. Yeah. So what was I saying before I got distracted? Oh, I turned my lights up. So I've been getting some really helpful feedback on the quality of the video because I do want it to like look nice. Like I want it to be informative, yes, but I also want it to look nice. So but Joshua and I were literally just talking about this before. So it's like, I'm not a professional, I'm a hobbyist. And he was like, you're a mid-range hobbyist. And I was like, what does that mean? He was like, you like the stuff and you want it to look good. And I'm like, you're not wrong. So any sort of feedback about lighting or anything else is super helpful as I try to figure out my like personal aesthetic. I think the videos look good, so that helps. All right, we're still on the 4 bobbin of my 124 fractal, which never fear, we are going to get to. I will explain. So I'm splitting my fiber into 4 pieces. So I have my 4 strippity strips. Polworth is so soft and squishy. I enjoy it so much. All right, and we're going to get to spinning. And what are we chatting about today? Did I tell you guys what we were talking about today? No. I don't know what we're talking about today. Oh, I know what we'll talk about today. We'll talk about my workflow. So I've had a few people ask me about my workflow from Fleece to Skein. And like, what do I do? How do I make decisions? How do I track things? So we're going to talk about my workflow from a Fleece right out the box to a Skein. Yeah, that sounds like fun, right? See you on the flip side. All right, we're treadling. We're moving. I had a bit of a silly moment. I decided to start spinning and I hadn't even like set up my wheel properly. Like the back of the maiden was still open. I didn't have the bobbin tension and I was just like treadling and I was like, why is nothing happening? And then I was like, Tashiana, you absolute ninny, you got to put your wheel back together. So we're treadling. Polworth is how do I say this properly? I would prefer to spin medium wools. I just enjoy spinning medium wools, but if I had to spin a fine wool, it would be Polworth or Targhee. I find them both super just squishy and soft, and Polworth just has great handle to it. So we're gonna go. This is gonna draft itself. It's super, super, super nice. All right, so we are talking about, I probably should do this. Let's go. We're talking about my workflow today from sheep to skein. I like saying from sheep to skein because they both have S's and I have a thing for alliteration, but obviously we're not going from the sheep, like the sheep stays with the farmer, but you get what I'm saying. We're talking about from sheep to skein, and there are a few things that I track when I get a fleece. So I use Airtable to track all of my sheep stats. And when we do my fleece tour video, I'm going to show you how I use Airtable to track all my sheep stats. I'm not going to do that today because I need to do like a screen grab of my computer to show you Airtable. And today's supposed to be like really casual and easy, and I'm not doing that today. So when we do the fleece tour, which we're going to be filming when I'm off work, so I have plenty of time to edit that video and put it together properly, I'll show you how I use Airtable. But the first thing I do when a fleece comes in is I add it to Airtable because I will quickly forget what I have if I don't have it recorded because it's literally tucked in. Oh no, my drive band just came off. Okay, BRB as I put my drive band back on. Okay, crisis averted. So the reason I use Airtable is because my fleece is literally tucked into random places all over my apartment. Like, I'm not joking. It's everywhere. There's a pile of it in the corner by our bookshelf. There are a bunch of fleeces that are vacuum sealed in our hall closet. There's a bunch of it that's in our bedroom on top of our wardrobe. It's literally everywhere. I try to keep it as contained as possible, but this is also the reason why the no buy is necessary, is because I need to give myself space to work through it without having so much of it coming in. But it's tucked into random places, and if I don't have a home to keep all of my notes in, I will quickly forget what I have. it will not get processed. And then also I might just buy the same breed. Now I can choose to buy, like I have, you know, more Shetland fleeces than any one person ever should, but that was a choice I made. But I don't want to buy because I'm like, oh, I don't have any Jacob and I would like to try Jacob, and I have a whole Jacob lamb sitting in the closet. Like, you get what I'm saying? So I kind of have to have a place, like a hub, where all my notes are kept so I can keep an eye on things that's coming in and how it's in workflow. So I use Airtable, and the first thing I do is I put the fleece in Airtable. I put the name of the sheep because the name of the sheep is very important to me. So I put the name of the sheep, I put the farmer who cared for the animal, I put the breed of the, you know, the sheep, if it's a cross or purebred or whatever have you, and I put the size of the fleece. I buy a lot of half fleeces because half fleeces are easy for me to work with. Like on general, you know, a half fleece will be like 3 to 4 pounds. If it's a fine wool, you're going to lose a bunch to lanolin. So by the time you scour a 3.5 pound fleece, you might end up with like 2.5 pounds of usable material. And that is a manageable project for me. So I'll put the weight of it, and then I'll make a few other notes in Airtable. If I had a plan for it in mind, if I bought it for blending, if I bought it to spin by itself, if it's my first fleece from that, you know, particular shepherd, if it's a fleece that if it's a shepherd that I want to, you know, frequent again, I make all my notes in Airtable the first thing I do. And then I weigh it. So I weigh the fleece and I compare it to what I paid for. You know, obviously sometimes things change. If someone's scale is calibrated differently or what have you, or maybe it got compacted, or there could be a number of reasons for margin of error. But like if I paid for 3 pounds and I got 2 pounds, that's an issue. And that has actually happened. And then I messaged the person and they were like, oh yeah, you know, I just totally made a mistake. I'll send you another pound or what have you. Or do you want a refund or something? It's human error. I have no idea how busy the people are who take care of these animals. Like, I have no idea what their lives look like, but human error is possible. So I always weigh it to make sure that what I paid for is what I got. I will accept like a 1/4 pound margin of error. Anything like 1/2 pound or up, especially if I'm paying per pound, might be worth investigating. I say might because it's not always worth investigating, but if you're like a pound shy, you might want to send the shepherd a message and just be like, hey, I'm not sure what happened here, but I'm a pound shy. Or you could just leave that alone. I have left it alone a few times. There was one time the reason I chased down the pound is because it was a pound of Perendale, which is like a very hard fleece to get. And I really, really, really wanted it. And so I happened to message the shepherd. But if I'm like 1/2 pound off or something like that, I don't quibble over a lot of that. So your mileage may vary, but I weigh it first. And then I put it away. I leave the fleece. Now, I know some people say you shouldn't store fleece in plastic and you should leave it where it's breathable, but in my personal like space constraints, I cannot take every fleece out and put it in like a fabric pillowcase. Like I don't have the space. So I try to scour them as quickly as possible so they're not sitting in the grease, but also like it can sit in the grease for a really long time without running into trouble. So none of my fleeces I've had for longer than a year. None of my fleeces I've had are dirty that I've had for longer than a year. So I leave them in the box. Again, your mileage may vary, but I leave mine in the box because it's most of the time they're like contained to a box, and then I can stack the boxes. If I take them out and put them in fabric pillowcases, then I have to find somewhere to put the fabric pillowcases, and that's not an easily stacked shape. And it's more trouble for me personally than it's worth. So I leave them in the box. I'm grabbing my second piece of fiber because I've gotten through that first strip of the pole worth already. So we're going to keep going. And then when I'm ready to scour, I take it out. I put it in its, you know, most of the time I scour in mesh laundry bags. There are a few fine fleeces that I'll scour in baskets to maintain lock structure. But for the most part, I'm dividing, like I open it up. Okay, so before I wash it, I open it up and I try to lay it out in the shape of the animal. And so I can evaluate the fleece. Most of the time I don't have to sort things and I wash it all up. But like if I get a fleece where the britch is particularly coarse and I want to keep that separate, I'll pull some of that off. I'll check it for like second cuts before I wash it. If there are some big glaring second cuts, I'll pull that out. Most of the time I check all that stuff after it's clean and I really want to work with it because I don't want to tangle with a dirty fleece. That's my personal choice. I just don't want to tangle with a dirty fleece. So I don't do much. I open it up, I lay it out in the shape of the animal, I pull off any bits that I really don't want to work with, and then I just put it in the mesh bags, and I bag it a pound at a time. I mean, a pound in each bag. Unless it's like a smaller fleece, then I'll do, you know, less. But I don't do more than a pound in each bag, because I'm putting them in the wash tubs, and I want to make sure that there's enough room for the fleece to get enough water and enough soap. And if you get like a high lanolin fleece and you really pack that bag full, there's not enough surface area for the water and the soap to come in contact with the fleece in there for it to get really clean. So if you like pack your bag full too much, you're not really scouring your fleece. You're just giving it like a little bit of a bath, but it's not going to get clean. So I do a pound, and then I go off to scour. And once it's scoured and I lay it all out to dry, then I weigh it a second time, because I like to know how much I lose just to the washing. A fine wool fleece is going to lose more to lanolin than like a Romney, because they're not as high in lanolin. But that's not the only thing that comes out of a fleece when you wash it. You lose dirt. I mean, they're animals, so they're out and about living their best lives. So all sorts of things are going to come out of a fleece. Dirt's going to come out, urine's going to come out, all that other stuff's going to come out. When you do it, like sometimes the first time you put a fleece in a cold soak, the water just goes like almost black. That's how dark it is. That's just all the dirt and stuff working its way out. So before I store fleece for vacuum sealing, or even before I put it in a bin for processing, I weigh it a second time just so I could track how much I lost in the washing. And then I put that number in Airtable next to, like, I have a card with each fleece, and I put that number in Airtable. And then it goes wherever it's going until I'm ready to actually use it. I batch wash because, listen, this is all labor. It's labor that I love, but it's labor. It's not exactly easy on my body to be bending down and hauling heavy bags of wool in and out of the tub. So when I do it, sometimes I'll scour 7-8 pounds in one day, so I don't have to do it again for a few weeks. So I wash things before I'm ready to use them. So that's the other thing about my Airtable, is I think my brain works in terms of tasks. So I track my fleeces in terms of tasks. So they'll be scoured, and then they'll move to, no, they'll go unscoured, and then they'll move to scoured, and then they'll move to stored, and then they'll move to ready for prep when I take it out of storage, and then they'll go to either combing or carding. And then from there, they'll go to ready to spin. And this will all make a lot more sense when you can see my Airtable setup, which I will show you. But I think about my fleeces in terms of tasks. So I move them across the workflow. And that way, I don't have things that are sitting around that I've totally forgotten about. So once we've gotten things stored and weighed, they go away until I'm ready to use them. And then once I'm ready to use them, the first thing I do is I sample. And I am actually working on a Shetland breed study video, which will actually explain my sample process a lot better, because you'll actually be able to see it. But when I sample, I comb and I card. I don't enjoy combing. Like, I know some people will like comb fleece forever and ever and ever. It's not my jam. I do it because there's sometimes a worsted prep is like really the way to go. But combing is not my jam. So I will comb a little bit. I do about 10 to 15 grams, and then I'll card a little bit. And the reason I comb and I card is because I want to see what kind of prep that fleece. Listen, the fiber will tell you. I know people say this, but the fiber will really tell you what it wants to be. And there are some fleeces that just make a beautiful worsted yarn, and then there's some fleeces that make a beautiful woolen yarn, so you can get a little bit of halo. And there's some fleeces that do both, and you get to decide what you want to do with it. So I always comb and I card. And then I spin up a sample of both. And from my singles, I decide if I want a 3-ply or 2-ply. So I do a lot of sampling before I actually start spinning for the fleece, because I got to decide what I want to do with my prep. And you can just go into it and like hope for the best, but you would do yourself a disservice and you would do your fleece a disservice if you don't have all this research in advance. So I track that, and I do my sample. I don't knit my samples, I will say that. I spin my samples because I can tell based on the yarn whether I'm going to like it or not. And then I pick a project sometimes I pick a project based on the yarn. It is very rare that I go into a spin with a project in mind, because I kind of want the fiber to tell me what it wants to be and what kind of yarn it wants to be when it grows up. So I don't really pick a project with, like, I don't pick fleeces with yarns in mind. I don't pick fleeces with projects in mind. I pick fleeces because I like the fleece. So I'll just decide on a 2 or a 3 ply. Most of my fleeces these days are becoming 3-ply round sweater yarns, unless I want to spin for lace. And if I want to spin lace, then I'll do a 2-ply, because 2-plies just tend to open up better with the yarn overs in lace than like a really round yarn. But if I wanted to knit like cables or color work or something with texture, I will go with 3-ply. So I spin my carded singles and my comb singles, and then I ply them, and then I check grist. And I'm sure you guys are sick of me saying the word grist. We're going to get to grist when we get to our spinning vocabulary section. But grist is really, really important. And it helps me get an idea of how much yarn I'm going to have for my particular project. Now, you don't need to do any of this stuff. You can literally just start spinning and enjoy the spinning and hope for the best. But if I'm going into a big project, I like to have an idea of what I'm going to end up with at the end of it. And I find the sampling process really important. One, because it tells me if I even want to spin this fleece by itself. There's been a few things where I was like, I don't like it by itself, so I'm going to save it and I'm going to blend it with something else. Maybe I'll blend it with some alpaca, or maybe I'll blend it with another wool. But I can already tell that I'm not going to enjoy spinning this whole fleece by itself. And I like to know that straight out the gate, because then you spend all these hours combing or carding and preparing your fleece for spinning, and then you start spinning it and it's not bringing you any joy. And the sampling process can help to mitigate all of that frustration after you've put in so many hours, which is why I recommend sampling anything. I mean, if you're going to do a big combo spin from like commercially processed top, sample, sample, sample. Like, decide on a fiber before you commit to buying all of this fiber and processing it and getting it ready, and then you don't enjoy it. I personally don't enjoy spinning Rambouillet. I wish I had known that about myself when I first started buying top, but I was buying top in the beginning based on like what color things were and not necessarily what fiber things were, and now I have a ridiculous amount of Rambouillet sitting around that I am making myself work through, but it's not really like my jam. And so like buying things in small doses and processing and sampling them is the way to go if you're spinning comb top. Now, if you've bought a fleece, sample, sample, sample anyway, and then decide what you want to do for your big project instead of just jumping right in and then hoping for the best. So I do my sample, I spin my combed or my carded yarn, I decide on a 2-ply or a 3-ply, and I check grist. And I always finish my yarns the way I'm going to finish my I finish my samples the way I'm going to finish my big skeins. Because if you finish your samples differently, then your finished yarn for your big project is not going to mirror whatever you got from your finished samples. I personally don't full my yarns. I know some people full their yarns. I don't full mine. I tend to just go in a very, very hot soak with some tough woolens. If there's a little bit of lanolin left in my fleece, I'll add a little bit of power scour to get like residual lanolin out. But for the most part, I go in a very hot soak with tough woolens. And then I leave it in until the water cools so that the scales on the yarn come down. And then I hang it to dry. I finish pretty much every single yarn the exact same way. I'm not making weaving yarn. So if I was making a weaving yarn, then maybe I would full my yarn, but I'm not really weaving. So I'm not making weaving yarns. For the most part, I'm making knitting yarns. And so I don't see the reason to full a knitting yarn. So I finish my samples the exact same way I would finish my full-on project, and then I just go about it. I mark all these numbers down. So I mark my grist, I mark my twists per inch, I mark my wraps per inch. I spin with a spinner's control card, which I feel like I've shown you in at least one podcast video, but I'll stick a picture of it next to me. So I spin with a spinner's control card, and what I do is I pull off a little bit of my singles and I wrap it around my card. I pull off a little bit of the 2-ply ply back and the 3-ply ply back. God, saying that is so hard. And I put that on the card. And that way, when I go to start my actual spinning project, I have a metric so that I can reproduce the yarn that I made the first time. Because if you sample but don't take notes, then you can't really reproduce. I mean, you might be able to. Maybe you're like some sort of like spinning savant who can do this stuff. But the odds of you reproducing the yarn that you made the first time if you don't take notes, probably not in your favor. So I measure the wraps per inch of my single. I measure the wraps per inch of my 2-ply back, the wraps per inch of my 3-ply back, and then the wraps per inch of my finished sample for my combed and carded samples. And that's how I sample. And when we do the Shetland breed study, you'll actually see that, because I'm throwing a bunch of language at you, and if you're not used to spinning, you're probably like, Tashiana, you're making zero sense. When we do the Shetland breed study, you'll be able to see how I sample. And I take pictures of all these things, and I keep all my samples in one place, because sometimes I sample and I don't actually get to the spinning for like months, because again, the chaos gremlin in the back of my head is very distracting sometimes. So I'll do my sample, and then I'll actually go to the processing. Now, I personally, listen, everyone has their own workflow. If I'm spinning a whole fleece, I do all the processing before I start spinning. If I'm planning on not spinning the whole fleece and I'm planning on blending it, then I will, make a bat here or there and spin it that way. But if I know I'm spinning the whole fleece from start to finish, I do all the processing before I start spinning. That is just the way I prefer to work, because my brain is task oriented. So I want to check off processing and then move to spinning. I don't want to process and then spin and then process and then spin and then process and then spin, because that frustrates me, and it also makes it hard to see if I'm making any real progress on my project. So if I finish all the carding, I can check off that step and move to spinning. But if I'm carding and spinning at the same time, I'm perpetually stuck in each step of that project, and then I can't move on. The other reason I finish all the carding at one time is because I don't clean my carder when I make bats until I'm finished with the project. So if I'm trying to card 2 fleeces, then I'm perpetually having to clean my carder between fleeces, and I don't want to do that. Like, I want to card, and then when I'm done, clean my carder and move on to something new. So I finish all the processing before I move on to the spinning. And then I weigh the other reason I do this is because I want to weigh all of the processed fiber I have, so I can also track how much I lose to processing. You're going to lose some at every step. Every step you're going to lose some, because when you start processing, you might find some second cuts. You might pull out some bits that don't feel as nice. You might have some locks that just don't open as nicely and you don't want to use. Your carder will eat fiber, so you're not going to get all of the fiber you put on the carder off. That's just the reality of the situation. So I weigh what my processed fiber is. And then if I'm spinning a 2-ply or a 3-ply, then I can divide how much goes onto each bobbin. So for March, I had 24 ounces of carded fiber. So I did 3 8-ounce bobbins, which works out perfectly because my bullfrog has a 16-ounce flyer. For the CVM that I'm working on, I had 20 ounces, but I'm spinning it on my Lendrum, so I didn't bother to divide it so neatly because I have 4-ounce bobbins, so it didn't really matter. So I'm just spinning it, and then when I go to ply, I'll just go to ply. So I weigh my carded fiber, and then I start spinning. And that's part of the reason why I have multiple projects on the go all the time, because there are some days that I don't want to spin, but I do want to play with wool. So I'll just start carding a project that I'm in the middle of. And then I can do something with my hands that doesn't necessarily involve me sitting and treadling for a few hours. So once I have my fiber processed, I get to work on the spinning. I pull out my control card. On my control card, I also write the ratio that I spun. I write which wheel I spun my sample on, and I write the settings, because that's the other thing. Like, if you have multiple wheels, all wheels are going to behave differently. 17:1, I mean, I know 17:1 should be universal, but I find that 17:1 on one wheel is not the same thing as 17:1 on the other wheel. So I want to make sure that I spin my sample, my big project, exactly the way I spun my sample. So that's all indicated on my control card, which wheel I spun it on and what ratio I did, so that once I get to spinning, then I get to really lose myself in the joy of spinning. And so I spin this is the other thing, I spin all my singles before I start plying. And that is just so, one, I'm not messing with the settings on my wheel. Like, I can leave the settings on my wheel the same until all the singles are finished. 2, I like to apply my first spun singles with my last spun singles, because we're human, and even though you have control cards and you do everything else, there's no guarantee that your singles are going to be uniform. And so I like to apply my first spun singles with my last spun singles, and that helps to like mitigate any changes that might have occurred in your yarn as you were making it. And I also don't like going from spinning to plying. That's just a personal thing, but I definitely think there is some advantage to keeping all of your steps together if you want a uniform and consistent yarn when it's over. And that's pretty much my workflow. Once I get my yarn spun and plied, I weigh it again before it's finished, because yarn expands in the water and fun things can happen. So I weigh it again before it's finished. I actually do count yardage before it's finished, and then I count it again afterwards. You don't need to really count yardage before your yarn is finished because things will change, but I like to be able to see what changes, like how much elasticity did I gain, how much length did I lose in the water. So I weigh my yarn and I calculate my grist before it's finished, and I calculate it again after it's finished. This is just me being a little nuts. You don't need your before finishing. You definitely do need your after finishing. You don't need your before finishing, but I like to just see how things have changed. And I also like to compare my grist of my finished yarn to the grist of my sample and see how close, how precise I was, how close to accurate I was over the pound plus that I spun versus the like 15 gram sample that I spun at the beginning. And that's my workflow. Once it's finished, it gets logged in Airtable. And sometimes I log my finished yarns in Ravelry. I don't always log my finished yarns in Ravelry until I'm ready to actually knit with them. Then I'll move my information to Ravelry. But once it's finished, the information gets logged in Airtable and the yarn gets put on a shelf. And I do the same thing for pretty much every single project. If I'm doing a big carded blend, I did the same thing with my sock blend. Like, I do the same steps with every spinning project, because that's how you can track, that's how you can track personal growth. Like, if your yarns are becoming more consistent, if your grist if your sampling grist is, coming out closer to your finished grist, it's a way of like checking your metrics as a personal, as a spinner, which is not, again, that's not something that everyone's interested in, but I'm definitely interested in becoming a more technical spinner over time. So these are all ways for me to keep an eye on whether I'm actually doing that. And also, I just find the math of it all, super enjoyable. But that's my workflow from sheep to skein. I get it in, I weigh it, I wash it, I spin it, I wash it, and I put it away. And I keep doing that over and over and over. I hope this helps. I hope this explained a little bit of my methodology. That seems like a big word for this is how I spin yarn. But I hope this explains a little bit of my methodology, a little bit of the method to my madness for how I get my yarns made and finished and how I work through so many projects at the same time. I will say, I'm not sure if you know this about me, Joshua and I don't have children and we have a lot of free time. I do work hard, so I get to play hard because I work hard. And so I have a lot of time to devote to my hobbies and my craft. So if it seems like I get through things pretty quickly, it's because I have the luxury of time and space to get through things pretty quickly. And I know that's not everyone's, story. That's not the journey everyone is living. So I hope this helps you figure out a workflow for managing your own projects, even if it looks like things might take you a little bit longer than they take someone else online. I think having a rhyme and a reason to how you do things and something that is repeatable is the way to go for helping you get through, the bigger projects. Because sometimes things can feel like a slog. Like, spinning 2 pounds of fleece is not easy. It's enjoyable, but it's not like the easiest thing in the world to do. And it is labor. Like, let's not forget that it does take actual work. It's work that we love. I'm assuming it's work that we love because we're doing it, but it is actual work. So find a workflow. I'm on my last piece of Polworth. I really love Polworth. I'll just spin it forever. Find a workflow that works for you and then make it happen. So that is day 6 of Vlogmas. We are moving right along. This is actually the halfway point. I'm looking at my basket. This is the halfway point of my Advent, which means we're at the halfway point of this whole video series. But I hope that it's been helpful. I hope that you've been, even if you're not learning something, I hope that you're enjoying hanging out with me. And I hope that you're taking tips to refine your own spinning practice. And if you don't have a spinning practice yet, I hope this is inspiring you to build one. I will see you in the next 2 days for whatever juiciness Jen has cooked up for us next. So till next time, happy Vlogmas, and I hope you're having the most magical December.